Brenda. Thank you everybody for joining us for this presentation that Brenda is going to put on tools to fix your presentations. I've known Brenda for about 1.5 years now, and I'm just so impressed with what she is doing as far as helping people to put together informative presentations. And so she's asked me to do an introduction for her, to let you know, all know a little bit about her background, and then she's going to dive right into that presentation. So Brenda Benham is a retired lawyer in Vancouver, BC. She's worked in private practice and in-house at the BC Securities Commission. She has taken training and undertaken research in how to give effective, memorable presentations. This led to her business, Memorable Presenter Consulting. Brenda has been part of the Toastmasters Club for over 18 years, and I had the joy of watching her compete earlier this year. And she's participated in district leadership positions in Toastmasters as well. Brenda is a longtime supporter of Dress for Success Vancouver and has a strong spirit of volunteerism, which I admire so much. And I think without further ado, I can pass this off to Brenda. Now I will be monitoring the chat, so there's going to be some points where Brenda will ask questions, and if you wanted to provide an answer or ask a question, you can go ahead and do so in the chat, and I will voice that for you. And so I think that is it. So Brenda, thank you.
Thank you so much for that lovely introduction, Meredith. I also want to thank all of you for taking time out of your busy days to join me, and for some of you to be joining me from what must be late at night or early in the morning, because it's 11 here in Vancouver, but for people who are in other countries, it may not be that at all. So I want to thank all of you. There are a ton of different things that you could be watching right now, or that you have been watching over the last little while, and I'm very thankful that you chose to watch this. I'd also like to express my appreciation for being able to live, work, and play on the unceded traditional territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples here in Greater Vancouver. I'm actually presenting to you from North Vancouver today. So we're North Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. So I'd like to start by asking you to do a self-assessment. The reason I'm doing this is partly because I've seen a whole bunch of online presentations that have not really been connecting with their audience, and partly because I want to get a better sense of the people in the room and how you feel about presenting. So there's 3 questions with a rating from 0 to 10. The first one is whoops, went too fast. How comfortable or confident are you presenting online? So 0 would be you've never done it, 1 would be you're terrified, 10 would be you really enjoy it and you've done it a lot. So 0 to 10, if you can put into the chat question 1 and then your number, and Meredith will be sort of keeping track of this for us as we go. Question number 2 relates to slides. Your slide deck. How comfortable, or how would you rate your ability to do a really great slide deck? So 0 would be that you never use slides. 1 would be that they are full of text, and you'll hear later why that's not such a good idea. And 10 would be that you have minimal text and that you think, sort of you thoughtfully picked out the images to be the best to help enhance your presentation. So that's question 2 is slides. 0 to 10 as a rating for yourself on that question. The third question is memorability. So 0, you haven't really ever thought about this. 1, you don't think you're really connecting at all. You don't think that people are remembering by the time you finish saying it, let alone, later. 10 would be you're pretty sure that they'll remember weeks or months after you present. So I'm sure many of you will have heard the Maya Angelou quote, people will forget what you said. People will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. So I invite you to think about how you would like your audience, to feel after your presentation. Well, during and after your presentation. So I want to take you back to March 31st. I was supposed to be doing a presentation at a hotel in Vancouver, but of course, here in Vancouver, we were doing social distancing by then. We'd been doing it for about 2 weeks. And so the presentation went online. The person who was hosting it ended up doing a whole day of events, and I was at 1 o'clock doing my signature presentation, Tools to Fix Presentation Mistakes, slightly different from today's presentation. And about 3/4 of the way through my presentation, I had a couple of guys who started talking over me. I asked our host, Anissa, to mute them so I could keep going. And she muted them, and they immediately unmuted themselves, and they kept talking. At one point, they said, "She has a face like a pug." I don't know if that was me, or more likely that was just something they said to say to get people off their game. And then they started scribbling on my screen. We closed down the presentation. We came back with a password because we didn't have a password originally, which is how they got in. We came back with a password. They were not there, but about 3/4 of the people who'd been there originally also were not there. So I'll come back to that presentation in a little bit, but first I'd like to have a look at some results and housekeeping. So Meredith, what do we have in terms of where people are from and what they do and so on?
Yes, it looks like we have a really nice crowd from all over the world. We have somebody I saw came in from Nairobi, there's lots of people here in Vancouver, there's people across America, lots of people from the learning and development. So I think you mentioned you were recently at the Alchemy Lab, so it looks like you made an impression there, Brenda, and have brought a few fans over to come say hello.
Well, Clint, who organized it, actually shared my post to the members of that community, which is, I think, how we got so many people from that community was Clint's work. So I'd like to thank Clint Clarkson for that.
That's fantastic. And there's somebody who's just mentioned they're here from Nigeria. Really good representation for a global presentation, Brenda. Wonderful crowd. And then if you're ready, I can share with you some of the answers to the questions.
Well, I was just going to ask a little bit about background. So we had learning and development, a fair number of those. Was there anything else that sort of stood out for you in terms of people's background?
As far as a group, not so much. There's quite a bit of learning and development. There's definitely a few self-employed, myself included in that. But no other standout groups.
Okay.
A little bit of this, a little bit of that.
And in terms of, so would you say more employees or more self-employed from the responses so far?
I would say more employees.
Okay.
But it's pretty, it's weighted both ways. Yeah.
Okay, that's great.
Pretty
so
even.
Yeah, let's move on to the self-assessment. So question 1, which was confidence, how many were 0 to 3?
Just 3, 0 to 3. And then the bulk of it is split between 4 to 7. Mm-hmm. And I would say there's a few more who are on the 8 to 10 side.
Okay. And for the next question about slides, how does
so this one is a little bit more evenly distributed. There's a few more on the 0 to 3, and then I would say the bulk is between the 4 and 7, and then there's a good representation of 8 to 10.
Excellent. And memorability.
So here is interesting. We're trending more towards the bottom half of that scale. So an equal number between 0 and 3 and between 4 and 7. And I didn't see any 10s. I might have missed the last couple that came in, but I didn't see anybody really on that high end of the scale.
Okay, thanks so much, Meredith. That was great. It's good to know. So I sent all of you yesterday a handout. If for some reason, a fillable handout that you can fill in as we go, or you can fill in when we play a game towards the end. So if you don't have the handout, if you could send a note to Meredith in the chat, and she does have the handout, and between you can figure out how to get it. The game, when you go to the game, which you'll want to do if you possibly can on a different device. I'll explain it more when we get there, but the questions will be on the screen you are watching now, and you need to be playing on something else that doesn't have the questions. So it's really hard to play if you have it on the same device. You can always just play along writing it out offline, but if you do that, you won't be included in the prize that will go to the winner of the game. When you get there, if you happen to go there now, it will ask you for your game pin. You'll get that when I open up the game when we get to it. So I thought I should start actually with a little bit about me and why I am, where I came from and how I ended up doing this. So my sort of presentation history started about 30 years ago at Simon Fraser University. We'd rented a room. I was at the BC Securities Commission by this point. I was a very good transactional lawyer, so I drafted documents. When I was at the law firm, I drafted contracts and corporate resolutions and offering documents. When I was at the Securities Commission, I drafted policies and forms and law. I had not done any presentations by that point. One day, my boss walked into my office and she said, "You wrote that policy. You need to go talk to our industry about it." And I went, "Blah, I don't do that." So of course, it was my boss. I probably didn't say that out loud. It was my boss. And sure enough, there I was at the foot of a raised classroom at Simon Fraser University in downtown Vancouver. All of those seats that look empty in the picture I've shared were filled with securities industry professionals waiting to hear about the policy I had drafted. I was terrified. I had no idea what I was doing. I had no idea about slides or memorability or all that stuff I asked you about. So I did the best I could, and I bored my audience to tears. They were not engaged at all. They were talking to each other. Some of them were sleeping. They certainly weren't paying attention to me. I felt devastated. I mean, I'm a lawyer. Lawyers are supposed to be able to talk to people. I mean, that's what you see on TV. They're talking to the jury. But of course, I wasn't that type of lawyer. I was determined to get over that terror I had felt. And as soon as the Toastmasters Club started at the commission, I joined. And that was hugely helpful. That got me over the terror that I had felt at SFU. I did speeches every other week, or, big or small. I had positive, encouraging feedback that showed me how to do better. Toastmasters I couldn't be doing what I'm doing now without Toastmasters. And I got to be what I would call a confident presenter, what we'll call confident Brenda. And I did presentations like many presentations you will see now, from people like me, lawyers, from accountants, from engineers, from many marketing people. All sorts of people do presentations that look like this. They share lots and lots of facts, and their slides just have text. And then there's more text and facts and more text and facts. As I got better, the text came in as I spoke about the facts, and I thought that was pretty impressive. The problem was that I was not connecting with my audience. Now, if your slides look something like that, you are not alone. Mine looked like that for 15 or 20 years. A long time I did presentations just like that. About 9 years ago, everything changed. I learned how people learn and remember, and I thought, oh good, I don't have to be boring anymore. For my last 5 years at the commission, I helped my colleagues, lawyers, accountants, engineers, give informative presentations that were memorable. In March of 2018, I retired from the Securities Commission. I retired as a lawyer, and I started my own business, as Meredith mentioned, Memorable Presenter Consulting. In my business, I help detail-oriented people give informative presentations that are memorable. So today, in the next 45 minutes or so, I am going to share with you a mistake and a tool in 3 topic areas. First, familiarity with the system. Second, eye contact. And third, slides. So 3 weeks ago, I was signed on to a Zoom training educational session that started at 1. I got there about 2 minutes to 1. The speaker was there. The speaker didn't know how to share slides, didn't know how to deal with people coming, didn't really know how to use the system at all, and started 15 minutes late. So mistake number 1 is lack of familiarity with the system. So even if that's a problem initially, it can be corrected. And so while it wasn't March 31st, the story I started with, it wasn't so much that myself or my host didn't know the system. It was more that we didn't know that Zoom bombing was a thing. That is, when people interrupt your presentation. It's called Zoom bombing, and it is quite a thing. I looked it up right after, and it was getting press, and the US government had spoken about it. It's a big deal. So what happened was that the host agreed to host another event, April 8th, and I could redo my presentation. That time we got it right. She took lots of precautions. We had a password. She used the randomized link from Zoom rather than her personal ID. She used the waiting room, which we used today. And we also turned off the ability for people to unmute themselves, because that was what had allowed the people who'd interrupted me to keep interrupting me after she had tried to mute them. So it is possible to get it right. Now, I had said that I wasn't too happy when I was at a presentation that started 15 minutes after it was supposed to, but I'm not the only one. I went out to a number of people and asked about pet peeves with online presentations. And one of the people I asked, the pet peeve they raised was meetings that are supposed to start at a particular time and start 10 or 15 minutes late. The problem with that is, from an audience perspective, it feels somewhat, well, more than somewhat, it feels like the presenter doesn't really respect the audience members. That my time, or the person who raised the pet peeve, that their time isn't as valuable as the presenter's time. And if your audience, if in their head they're going, this person doesn't respect me, they are really unlikely to take in the key information that you're sharing. So tool number 1 for system familiarity is to get yourself a co-host and do a dry run. So Meredith is my co-host today, and she's very helpfully been letting people in for me. And we did a dry run on Friday so that we could go through the technical issues and make sure that I can do what I want to do smoothly once I am here with all of you. So Meredith, does anyone have any questions about system familiarity?
There was one question here in the chat about a concern that if they don't have the perfect background, it won't look professional.
Well, there's a couple of ways. That's a great question. Thank you. There's a couple of ways that you can deal with that. One is to go on camera before you're live, either in the dry run or separately, just before, and check what is in your background and make sure that you sort of move out the clutter if you can. If that's not doable, Zoom has virtual backgrounds that you can choose, and that allows you to put up a background that hides whatever mess is behind you. And indeed, I was on a call not too long ago where the person noted that his hair was really poofy, and he could, by putting a virtual background up, it actually removed the poofiness in his hair. So virtual backgrounds are a possibility, or tidying up the area behind you. Any other questions, Meredith?
More of a comment that perhaps a question around the Zoom backgrounds, that they work better with a green screen. Has that been something that you've seen, or is it necessary?
When I've used them, I actually found they worked okay without a green screen. I think it will depend on your system, and I think what I read on a Zoom post about this is that if your system doesn't have enough power, memory, I'm not sure quite what it was, but some systems, it helps to have a green screen for that virtual background. I don't think it's necessary all the time, but I think it is useful sometimes. Anything else?
Nothing else in the chat at this moment.
Okay, let's keep going. So I was on a Toastmasters Zoom, or not Zoom, but an online Toastmasters meeting about a month ago. And the person who was presenting had his notes on it, probably, I don't know what he had it on, a chalkboard or something, above his camera. So his whole presentation, he was looking above the camera as he was looking at his notes. Occasionally he'd look back and then he'd look above the camera. So mistake number 2 is lack of eye contact. Ethos 3 did a study reported on a study which found that the audience remembered a speaker more and remembered the content more if the presenter looked at the screen at least 30% of the time. National Geographic did a very interesting article on Zoom fatigue and also talked about looking at the camera. So if you were with me in person, you'd be getting about 70%, if there's a conflict between what I'm saying and how I'm looking, 70% of what the brain takes in is nonverbal. It's how my voice is, which you do get on Zoom, and how I look, which is a bit harder to get on Zoom. Typically, in a call like this, there is limited nonverbal cues, and that means you need to pay more sustained attention to the words, and that can be tiring. As Andrew Franklin, a cyber psychology prof at Norfolk State University in Virginia, said, for somebody who is dependent on nonverbal cues, it's a big drain, and it makes them very tired when they don't get those cues. But certainly one of the things you can do is having eye contact. And eye contact is important if you're presenting in person, but it's even more important if you are presenting online. Now, eye contact with a bit of help is something that you can improve. I organized a panel discussion of the Women Lawyers Forum here in Vancouver, which was online. And at our dry run, one of the panelists spent the entire time looking at her notes, which were off to the side. And I mentioned that to her, and she clearly didn't need her notes. She knew her stuff. And when we got to the actual event, she was looking at the camera, which was awesome. She had the improved eye contact that's so important. So tool number 2 for eye contact is to become friends with your camera. First is figure out where your camera is. Is it on top of your computer? Does it have a light next to it? Is it a webcam on top? Do you actually have it set up as a separate thing? And then when you are practicing, practice looking at the camera as much as you can during your practice sessions. So just before we get to questions about that, I thought I would share some other pet peeves that people raised. So as I said, I had asked for pet peeves, and almost 30% of them related to audience interaction. So the first is the sort of Mandatory, I have that with question, mandatory being on video. You don't know why someone has turned their video off. Maybe it's that they have kids running back and forth behind them and it's going to be really distracting. Maybe they're off camera because they're afraid for their safety and they're worried that if this becomes public, well, this one will, I'm recording it, they're afraid that they won't be able to maintain their privacy. The second pet peeve that was raised is no interaction. The presenter drones on and on and on and on and doesn't ask the audience to do anything at all. I've been asking you to put things into chat and I'll continue to do that as we go forward. The next thing that people raised is the distracted presenter. So if I had started presenting and then every time a new person came, I'd said, oh, wait a minute, there's someone to come in, and I'd stopped and done that. Or, oh, there's something in the chat, let me look at that. Once I'm presenting, I should be focused on the people who are here. And that's why having a co-host like Meredith today is so important, because she can deal with all that stuff and I can concentrate on making sure that my presentation is engaging for those of you who are here. And the final one, which is one I haven't seen at all, but someone raised it as a pet peeve and it was so odd I thought I would share it. On a call they were on, the person, presenter or host, I'm not sure, did a roll call at the beginning. There were 48 people on the call. So, is John Smith here? Yes. Is Susan Jones here? Yes. 48 times. You do not need to do that. Zoom lets us know who was on the call. We can get a report, and you don't want to waste time. I mean, 48 times doing that takes quite a bit of time. So does anyone have any questions about eye contact or other audience interaction issues?
So Brenda, somebody is asking about being able to make a genuine connection through the camera, and if that's possible in the same way or in comparison to how we would do that in person.
That's a great question. Yes, it is difficult. It certainly is not the same as being there in person. You can't see all the people in front of you and make contact with them individually, which is what I help my clients with, sort of tools to do that when you have a room in front of you. But there are some things you can do to make it more personal. And if you have difficulty sort of connecting with an inanimate object, which many of us do, one thing I did at the beginning was to post a picture sort of immediately behind the camera of someone who is if you want, a potential audience member or a friend who's really engaged, a picture of someone who is, sort of really listening to you, and then looking at them sort of behind the camera. And that can really help make it feel like you are talking to an actual person, not just an inanimate object. Any other questions, Meredith?
Nothing else at this time.
Okay, thanks. So in January of 2016, a group of us at the Commission watched a webcast from Ontario. The topic was crowdfunding, and the presenter talked about the difference in the rules between the crowdfunding rules in Ontario and the crowdfunding rules in BC. In doing that, he actually got the BC rules backwards. He said they only applied to Group A, when in fact, Group A couldn't use them at all. The BC rules only applied to Group B. At the end, I said to my colleagues, that was pretty weird. You don't often see someone get something completely backwards. And all but one of them sort of nodded and said, yeah, that was weird. And one person said, no, he got it right. And we went back and forth a few times. No, he didn't. Yeah, he did. No, he didn't. And then he said, oh, I know what happened. I was reading the slide. I didn't hear a word he said. Now, if you're going to be presenting, you want your audience to hear you. And I'm going to share with you why text on the slide doesn't help. So mistake number one is overwhelming slides, having too much text or too much data, too much something. This is an actual slide. If I blew it up, you'd be not able to focus at all. You may not be able to anyway down there. But this is a real slide of the US strategy for getting Afghanistan to be stable. And if you were trying to read that, you wouldn't hear a word I said. So what, if you could put into the chat, what is the worst thing you've seen on slides? And while you're doing that, I'm going to mention a video called Life After Death by PowerPoint by Don McMillan. Don McMillan is an engineer from Stanford. He has a master's degree in electrical engineering, but he is not currently practicing as an engineer, just like I'm not currently practicing as a lawyer. Instead, he is a corporate comedian. And this video, which at some point Meredith will put into the chat for you, a link to that video, is very, very funny as he sort of in an exaggerated way goes through things, all the bad things we've seen in PowerPoint or in slides. So Meredith, what have we got in terms of the worst things people have seen in slides?
Well, far and wide, everybody agrees that too much text or just reading off a slide is a common pet peeve. And another one is multiple panel experimental data with no information. So I think just chart heavy is what they're saying there, with no interpretation of those charts or data.
Yeah, those sort of match what we got in the pet peeves that I asked for before I did this presentation. Exactly the same thing. We had too much text, and worse yet, reading from the slide that people can read themselves. So I'm just going to take a slight aside here and talk about a boot camp that I did with Victoria Cubbon, who is also a member of Havana. So Victoria is a designer, marketer, and illustrator. She'd been asked to do a presentation, and she was very inexperienced. She doesn't mention the slides in what she said about working with me, but I was there and I saw her slides. But what she said was, by working with Brenda, I was able to create a structure for my talk and come up with relatable stories to share. Brenda's strategy gave me the confidence I needed to make my talk as effective, entertaining, and memorable as possible. Now, I was there when she did her presentation. Her slides were great. She had very little text. She had lots of images, and she connected with her audience, both from the stories she told, but also from the way her slides were. Science tells us, it's not just you saying or me saying that too much text or data is a bad thing. Science tells us that the more text and data you have on your slides, the less that people remember. That means that your slides should not be your speaking notes, and your slides should not be your handout. The reason for this is work by John Sweller, who came up with a theory called the cognitive load theory, and in it he talks about our limited working memory. So working memory is where things go when they come in from our eyes or our ears, we taste something, we touch something, or our brain tells us things like that self-talk that's going on in the background. All of that is going into working memory. And what Sweller found is that is a very limited resource. I like to think of it as being a wooden box. So you're really hungry and you go to the grocery store and you fill up that box with junk food. You fill it to the very top with candy and pop and chips and other stuff that's bad for you. And then you remember that you're there for your groceries for the week. And so you try to put in fruit and vegetable and protein, and you put it in and it just rolls away because the box is already full. So what Sweller said is, if you fill up your working memory, if you fill up that box with the how you're presenting or with things you're doing in the presentation, there won't be room in your working memory or your audience's working memories for the important information that you have to share. So following on John Sweller's work, another psychologist, Richard E. Mayer, came up with 12 principles of multimedia learning. And many of them go to speech with images is good. Speech with text, not so much. And I'm going to just share one of the principles with you, which is the redundancy principle. If I am speaking and the words that I'm saying are up on the screen, your brain will be trying to figure it out. Your brain will first be reading and then doing this comparison. Oh, is what she's saying the same? That's different? Why is it different? What's going on? Your brain's doing all of that, which is filling up that working memory box. The other problem, if you have text on the screen, even if it's short little bullets with a hand, like a handout style, not your speaking note style, even so, your audience, unless you bring them in one by one, your audience will be up on point number 5 when you are talking about point number 1. And if that's what they're doing, they're not hearing you. So we've learned why you don't want to have text on the slide. But if you don't have text, what's the point of having slides? And the point of slides is to support you as the speaker. So tool number 3 for slides is to include an image and title on every slide. In my April 8th presentation, and maybe you could share the link for that again, Meredith, my April 8th presentation, I did talk about learning styles. And so for visual learners, images are critically important. But another type of learner is a reader-writer person, that a learning style. And for them, the title on the slide is critically important. So my tool is to have an image and title on every slide. Does anyone have any questions about slides, Meredith?
How do you suggest beginners transition to limited or no text on slides when they are used to using small bullet points to remind them of what they wanted to talk about?
Well, there are ways you can structure your presentation so that my 5-step structure that I share with my clients has a way that you can sort of have stories and then content, stories and content. That's one thing, is to organize it in a way that will make it easier to remember and think about those transitions that you're going to use. Secondly is, of course, to practice. Because if you think that you can just throw a slide deck together and go out and do it the next day, even someone who's a very experienced speaker does need practice. And so, sorry to say, it's not something you can just do off the side of your desk. You need to at least set some time aside to be able to practice. And that practice, if you're practicing without your notes and then going back and looking at your notes and then doing it again without notes and then going back to see what you missed, that will allow you over time to develop a way that you can just speak to the camera, which we talked about in eye contact, and not have to look at your notes very often. Maybe you have to look occasionally, and that's okay. You don't have to look at your camera 100% of the time. That might actually feel weird and intimidating. But looking at it most of the time, because you know what you're going to be talking about when you get to a slide that says whatever the title is. The titles help too, actually. Any other questions?
Yeah, thank you, Brenda. There was one more question about if there's a general rule or suggestion for how many slides you should have in a presentation.
The short answer is no, there isn't really a rule for that. You obviously, I think you want enough slides. It depends also on timing. You know, if every slide is a minute and you have 30 minutes, that would be 30 slides. Probably that's not the way. For me, that's not how it works, because some slides are really, really quick and other slides are quite long. I would say if you're doing it online, you probably want slightly more slides rather than less, because if you're in front of a room, you can have a slide up for quite a while and people will focus on you. And online, it is a little bit harder because I'm a little bit smaller. It is harder. And so I'd say a few more slides than you would normally, but there isn't sort of a hard and fast rule for how many slides to use.
Okay, thank you. No other questions in the chat right now.
Okay, well, that brings us to our game. So as I said, if you can, go to a different device, probably your phone, and go to kahoot.it. And I will, once I finish the description for you, I will go to Kahoot. And when I get there, you will see the pin. So don't worry about the pin right now. You will be asked for a nickname. Please put your real name in, because when I go to figure out who the winner is, I need to know who you are. And the winner will receive a $5 online gift certificate. I'll be in touch to figure out what would be of most use for you. So as I said, the questions and the possible answers will be on the screen you are watching now. The place that you need to fill in your guess will be on your other device if you can do it that way. You get points based on getting the correct answer quickly. So if I answer you have about 20 seconds per question. If I answer in 2 seconds and you answer in 19, I will get more points because I was faster. So that's how it's scored. I will now I'm going to move a little bit closer because I need to be able to actually reach the computer to move the game along. So our game pin is 1770974. 1770974. People are joining, which is great. How many people in total do we have, Meredith? I'm just trying to figure out how many I let in before I start.
46.
46, okay.
Including you and I.
Okay. I've got 21 players right now. I'll wait for just 1 more minute and then I will start the game and people can join us in process. Okay, I don't know if that was a minute, but I'm going to start. $24 people, 25. Okay, let's start. How can you prevent Zoom bombing? You should be able to see the questions on your screen and the image, like the triangle or circle, and the color on where you're playing. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So almost everybody got it right. It was indeed to keep the link and password private and to use the waiting room. And right now, whoops, somebody's in the waiting room, which is blocking me seeing who's on top. Oh, there we go. Kimberly is on top, but only by 3 points over Roderick and not by much over M. Mortar and Rachel Titus. So let's see how we do on question 2. What reason did you learn about why it's important to start a presentation on time? Five, 4, 3, 2, 1. Yeah, most people got that right. If you start late, it feels disrespectful to the audience. And let's see what that did to our leaderboard. And Mortar has jumped in front by 10 points. And Namdi Shiadiku, sorry, I butchered your name, but you moved up 9 places, which is pretty impressive. Question number 3. What's the tool I shared for lack of familiarity with the system? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And almost everybody got it right. Do a dry run with your co-host before your presentation. Let's see what that did to the leaderboard. Oh, M. Mortar is farther in front, but Suzanne moved up 5 places, so that was very good. The fastest climber. Question 4. What's the minimum proportion of time that you learned a presenter should look directly into the camera? And yeah, most people got it right at least 30% of the time. Oh, M. Mortar's pulling ahead. Carl de Jong moved up 5 places, so that was very good. What's the tool I shared to correct for lack of eye contact? Four, three, two, one. And most people again got that right. 17 of you got it right. And 3 people have an answer streak of 3, and Mortar moved up a bit again. What's one pet peeve I shared relating to audience interaction? Five, four, three, two, one. We've got our 17 again, getting it right. Then it becomes just a question of timing. Oh, Kevin moved in front with Janice next and Maria. But Kevin's got a bit of a lead of 5 people have an answer streak of 3. Question number 7. What is the biggest mistake I shared relating to slides? Five, four, three, two, one. And most people got that right, overwhelming the audience with text and data. Oh, Kevin's still on top. Janice is next, 300 points back, and 4 players have an answer streak of 4. Question number 8. Science tells us that the more text and data on the slides, five, four, three, two, one. Everybody but one of you got it right. The less the audience remembers. Very good. And then it's just a question of timing. Kevin's now 400 and some above Janice, and 3 players have an answer streak of 5. Question number 9, the second to last one. What are slides for? And everybody's answered, with most people getting it right, supporting the speaker. Kevin's still in front, Janice still in second, but M. Mortar is making a comeback with 3 in a row. And the final question, what is the tool I shared to improve slides? Five, four, three, two, one. And almost all of you got that right, to include an image and title on every slide. And here's our podium. In 3rd place, we have Maria. In 2nd place, we have Janice. And in 1st place, we have Kevin, yay! So I'll be in touch with you, Kevin, about your gift certificate. Thank you all. I hope you had fun playing. And here's the sort of leaderboard in terms of what point totals people had. So I'm now going to go back. I hope everyone had fun and enjoyed playing the game. So I shared a lot of information with you today, and I don't expect you to remember everything, but I hope you will remember the 3 tools. For lack of familiarity with the system, do a dry run with a co-host. For eye contact, become friends with your camera. And for slides, include an image and title on every slide. Imagine if every time you presented, people were focused on what you were saying. They weren't wandering off to do something else. They actually were there and wanted to hear what you had to say. Even better, they remembered what the key information, not everything, but the key information weeks or months after you spoke, and they applied that information to their business or their life. So there's 3 ways that I can help people get there. One is the boot camp that I mentioned. So this is for inexperienced speakers, presenters who are sort of afraid of public speaking, who really don't know what they're doing. This would be like I was 30 years ago at SFU, or like Victoria was when I helped her in December. Normally, this takes about 6 weeks, but we can customize it to be the length of time you need. For Victoria, we did it in 3 weeks. And what I do is I provide training in organization, my 5-step structure, 5-step organization I mentioned, in slides, and in and in presence on stage, and connecting with your audience. And we do training and then practice with feedback. Training on the 2nd topic, practice with feedback. Training on the 3rd topic, practice and feedback. And in all cases, I'm sharing how in that area you can connect more with your audience so they'll remember your key information. The 2nd way I help clients is with my polish. This is for experienced speakers who know what they're doing. They may have just one thing they want to fix, or they just want to make one tweak to make their next presentation even better. They just want to polish up their presentation. For example, I worked with Marie-Hélène Pelletier. Marie-Hélène has given, when she came to me, she had given over 500 speeches. The reason she came to me was that she was doing a topic that she wasn't as familiar with, and it was one of her larger audiences. She was speaking to 1,600 people. She came to me after she'd handed in her slides. So this was just about story and about, it was really just about organization. What Marie-Hélène said was, Brenda was fantastic. She pointed out what I needed to keep doing and made helpful recommendations, all of which I followed. I knew I could trust her, and doing so paid off in getting closer to my audience faster. In addition to working with individuals, I work with organizations. And in that case, I tailor what I do to what the organization needs. So it might be a lunch and learn. It might be an afternoon or all-day workshop. It can be whatever works for your organization. And right now, I'm offering a very lunch and learn for organizations on sort of how you transition from, more detail than I gave today, how you transition from in-person presenting to online presenting. So if you're interested, you can let me know. So for example, I worked with EWAS, which is a division of Cargill, the international feed company. EWAS is here in Greater Vancouver. And Katrina, who asked me to come in and speak to her organization, said, Brenda accommodated our request to customize her training materials to our staff. More importantly, she delivered an engaging and effective workshop. So I have a gift for all of you. It is a free, no obligations at all, 45-minute needs assessment discovery call. What we'll do in that call is review what you're, between us, we will talk together about what you're already doing well and areas that you could do even better. If you are interested in taking me up on this offer, please send an email to, you have my email because I've been sending you notes about this event. Please send me an email that says needs assessment in it. And if you have a presentation coming up, the date of your presentation, because if you have a presentation next week, I obviously want to get you in sooner than someone whose presentation is a month from now. And you don't have to have a presentation at all. We can do this when you're just thinking about a potential presentation. So I'd like to go back to the quote I started with from Maya Angelou. People will forget what you said. They will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. How do you want your audience to feel at your next presentation? We've got a few minutes left for questions. Do we have any final questions, Meredith?
Well, Brenda, you froze up for just a brief second there when you were telling everyone how to take you up on the 45-minute assessment call. If you wanted to just repeat what you said, to send an email, to title it with needs assessment, and then you kind of froze up for just a second. Do you want to repeat that?
Absolutely. So yes, send an email, include needs assessment in the title if you can, or at least in the content. And if you have a presentation coming up, let me know the date of your presentation so that if if your presentation is next week, I can fit you in before someone whose presentation is 3 months away. So that's it. Just send me an email saying you're interested. If you have a presentation coming up, let me know that. You're welcome to do a needs assessment without a presentation coming up. But if you have one, then I want to make sure I value your time and get you in soon. So if you do have a presentation coming up, or you are just interested in improving your presentations, I would urge you to send a note to me asking for that needs assessment. Any other questions or comments?
Thank you, Brenda. We do have one more question in the chat box, which is if you have any specific tips for a 5-minute Ignite style presentation.
I'm not sure. Maybe could you unmute the person whose question is I'm not entirely sure what an Ignite style presentation is, and I want to provide value when I answer that. So
sure, I'll ask for some clarification there, and then maybe while I'm doing that, you can answer.
I can answer this. Oh, okay. Yeah, I could answer another question, or I could talk generally about a 5-minute presentation.
Sure. There's another question that is it ever okay to use a complicated chart in a slide?
I would say, assuming you want people to listen to you, having a chart in a slide is fine. Sometimes charts are the best way to convey the information that you need to convey. But I would urge you to make it as simple as possible. For example, because what they are there for is to hear your insight about what's in that chart. So they need to be paying attention to you. So if you have a bar graph and it has 3 bars, that's fine. You can say the first bar is this, the second bar is that, and you'll notice that, this bar is higher, or whatever you want to say about it. But you don't want to have, you'll love the video that we shared earlier by Don McMillan, because he has some lovely charts where he starts off and then he adds more and he adds more and he adds more, and it becomes completely unintelligible. So, if, for example, it's got the identification for the charts are sideways, your audience will be trying to do that to read what it says, and they're stopping listening to you once they're doing that. So charts are great, but make them as simple as you possibly can.
Thank you. And so for clarification on the Ignite style presentation, it does seem to be specific to the tech industry, and it's a 5-minute presentation. And typically people are spending 30 seconds per slide and then move on to the next slide. So do you have any tips for that format of a presentation?
Yeah, so I would say, I mean, my five-step structure can work with a 5-minute presentation, or it can work with a half hour or an hour or a 5-hour or whatever. It can work for any size of presentation. So the steps in my 5-step structure are: you start with a challenging story, but in a 5-minute presentation, that could be a 30 seconds. You don't need it to be long. You then want what is called a springboard story, and I could talk more to you about that, but that's one that inspires people to want more. And again, that can be 30 seconds. It doesn't have to be, 5 minutes or anything. Then timing, sort of in the next 5 minutes, I'm going to share this. Then your content divided into 3 buckets, and finally your call to action at the end. And that can be fit into 5 minutes, or into 30 minutes, or into an hour. You just would expand or contract what you're doing in each of those segments to fit what you're doing. I hope that answered the question.
Thank you, Brenda. And there's no other questions in the chat right now. A lot of praise for you, though, so I hope you take a moment to go in and see what people are saying, and a lot of the thank yous are rolling in.
Okay.
But no other questions at this time.
Okay, well, it's 12:01. Thank you so much to everyone for taking time out of your busy day to come and be at my presentation today. Thank you, Meredith, for being such a great co-host and helping people enter and monitoring the chat and doing all that stuff. It was great. You are welcome to leave now, but I think I said in an earlier message I sent that I will keep this call open. I will stay on for as long as, well, for up to half an hour for anybody who wants to just have a private chat or who has another question. And so I will do that. At this point, so as I said, we are now done. Thank you again for coming, and have a great rest of your day.